All right. Yes? They all do that. All that is a mark to say that I know who's got them, so I know who doesn't have them. So don't panic. So hadn't gotten to that yet. So if you see something weird like that, that's a lot of us will use those as a grading mark so I can see who still hasn't taken the test, for example, on there. So, all right. So we want to finish this up. I want to talk about a couple of the assignments you have this week. So there was some confusion by a couple people, or maybe I didn't make it very plain in the way I wrote it, so I'll talk about that. I want to finish up this chapter and get ready to move on. We talk about payment systems, and we talked a little bit about ePay and near-field communications and Apple Pay and those kinds of systems. Well, one of the things we need to do is look at, there's a little bit of difference between types of cards, and some people don't realize that. And so one of the big differences is between a credit card and like your debit card. So a debit card looks like a credit card. Usually they even say Visa or MasterCard right on them. But there are some differences. One of them is that money on a debit card, it comes immediately out of your checking account or a bank account, whatever you've got it linked to. A credit card, they charge you, and then at the end of the month you get a bill and they say, hey, you can pay it. So you can pay portions. If you don't pay the full thing, you get charged interest. But in terms of security, here's an issue that happens or can happen. So debit cards, up to the limit of that card per day. And so for example, my card at Auburn State Bank, we discovered, has a $2,000 a day limit. You can charge that much in a day on that card. If somebody gets a hold of that and charges that at a bank or business or somewhere else, that money's gone immediately out of your account. Some banks will work with you to try to retrieve it in fraudulent transactions, but you do not have the same level of protection you do on a debit card as you do on a credit card for fraudulent transactions. By law, credit cards, they can only charge you $50 per fraudulent transaction. Now that still sounds like a lot, and most of the times they'll waive that, but you have some better protection. So if you're buying a lot of stuff online, while I don't like the idea of you guys or anybody having a giant credit card that's racked up to the sky, it does give you some additional protection. When you're traveling, credit cards tend to have better abilities to work overseas than your debit cards. It's a matter of choice. Those debit cards come automatically out of your account. It's very convenient, but there are some liabilities with it. So a charge card is actually a great marketing way, great marketing thing we can do with a lot of companies. So American Express is the idea of a charge card. It doesn't say, hey, I can use this, and at the end of the month it comes due, but they a lot of times have things linked to. So the other one you'll see is a store charge card. So the reason they want to do that is they keep your business there. So Menards has their Menards charge card, and you can go there, or Kohl's or other ones, and they want you to use that. The latest technology is this idea of a smart card. It's been used in Europe and Asia for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. We're just now getting to the point where we're here. In fact, there's a lot of places still, oh, well, no, we don't do the smart cards. You'll just have to swipe your smart card, which defeats the entire purpose of having that chip on the card. So we do get a little better processing, a little better ability to protect your assets. But think about that when you're shopping, especially if you're doing somewhere that's a little sketchy online. Those debit cards can be a dangerous thing because they can literally drain your bank account. And maybe you can get it back by working with your bank, but maybe not. Whereas that charge card or that credit card has a little better protection on those kinds of things. So we want to look at something called transaction processing systems. Ooh, what is that? So this is that idea of when we're a business, how do we take all this data and we process it? So the model we're going to use is Amazon for the most part. So Amazon has to have a way that when you go online, you charge your card, you buy a product, So maybe I needed this new giant beanbag for my apartment. I've bought that, and transaction processing systems have to have some way to move that data from sales to the order system to the inventory system so they can deduct it from their inventory. They send it to the order processing center so that order gets sent to you. They also send data back so that you can track your order. It has to then, Amazon says, well, I need to reorder big fluffy bean bags for our warehouse. So all of those processes occur. The traditional method that businesses have used is something called batch processing. So all that data is stored stagnant about you buying that until the end of the day or whatever time they chose to process those. So they process them in big batches. So the computer systems would take all that data, churn it out, and then spit it back. The problem with that is it's not real time. And so online transaction processing is the idea that we can do this faster and we can do it real time. So one of the problems may be with that batch processing. So that worked really well. We had all these mainframes, and still you'll see batch processing at a lot of organizations. If you go in and get a tag for your vehicle, that's batch processed by the state at the end of the day. It's not done on a real-time basis. So if you get your tag and you get pulled over 5 minutes later, they don't know that you really just did pay that unless you show them that receipt, because it's not yet in the system, because it has to be batch processed. But think of the problems that would hold for something like Amazon. So everybody goes out and buys those big fluffy bean bags, but there's only 10 of them in stock and 12 people place an order. And you don't know until tomorrow that your order was rejected. Would you be frustrated with that experience? Yeah. So online transaction processing takes more power, more computational resources, but we're doing things essentially live. So they have this great example or a model. Some of their models are okay. So this is that idea that data is accumulated, we process it, and at some point it comes back. That could be every day. There are systems that used to process things every week. We still do some batch processing with your student records. Some of your stuff that you do doesn't get processed until the end of the day. So sometimes admittance records, for example, get processed on a daily basis. Your enrolling in classes is pretty much live. It's an online transaction processing system. It's fairly live. The minute you enroll in a class for the spring, we can see it and we can keep track of those results. Think about that if you had enrolled for a class and you didn't find out till tomorrow that you were full and you got kicked out. It'd be frustrating. So we're trying to move, and most businesses are trying to move to this idea of online transaction processing. But it takes more power. It takes more resources. And it does create some problems. So if you think about a large company, all these things are transactions. Employees, things like time cards and paychecks. Time cards are one that's traditionally a batch process. So most of you have probably worked somewhere where you had to punch a time card. Everybody know that idea? You put it in, or you had to write it down at the end of the week, or every 2 weeks you send it in. That's that idea of batch processing. We do it here with our own students. We process them once a week. But now we have that ability. We can have you logging in, and we can actually see what our labor costs are on a per daily basis, per hourly basis. So companies can adjust and track what's going on better. So the customers, we see what they're doing. Our inventory we can process. If we're manufacturing something, we know what's going on. Shipping and receiving gets that data immediately and can report, oh, somehow we screwed up and we don't really have 10 of these super fluffy bean bags. We only have 8. And we can make those things a little quicker, those decisions and changes. Materials, if we're going to purchase them, if we're making something, we can get those materials in quicker. The quicker we can cycle all this, the more efficient that business can begin and can become. So, these are all good things. What can we do with it? timely response, better customer service. So my Peloton story doesn't end yet. I emailed the CEO of Peloton. I told you my story about how they didn't know anything about it. So I found an email address for the CEO of Peloton, a guy named John Foley. I emailed him my tale of woe and how crappy their product was. And I got a response yesterday, but not from him, but from one of the... We received an email that was addressed to Mr. Foley. If you'd like, we can try to reschedule your service request, and we're going to offer you 2 months free service of streaming online service. And it was very snarky at that point. I said, whatever. But it's interesting it came back, but they still can't figure out the order. She was asking in there, what's your original order number so that we can process this? They still can't find me in there. They're willing to respond to an email. And the funny thing is, had they actually looked at the email, I have the original order number and the response or the number from the repair order, both of them. But they didn't bother to even look. Such is life. So, we're going to try to get data better. We're going to avoid fraudulent transactions and be able to spot them quicker. So you think a company like Amazon has a lot of fraudulent transactions? People steal credit cards, or they're trying to ship them somewhere else so they can deal with it. Right now, one of the big issues Amazon has is this idea of porch pirates. Are there things that we can do to avoid that? Hopefully. So, competitive advantage. Competitive advantage means we're doing something that the other companies we're competing against aren't. We have an advantage over them, which means we can make money while they can't. And so that comparison of Sears and Amazon is really a good one, I think, because it shows where Sears could have been and what the defaults were or the faults they had in their system. So typically we include an order system, an accounting system, so somehow we know where that flow of all data involving money. Purchasing system, so we're selling products, we have to get purchasing, so we have to replenish that. If we sell all of our products and we stop when we're done, we're a garage sale. We're not really a company. So, different things we want to look at. If we want to lower inventory, why would we want to lower inventory? If we're a retailer, why do we want the lowest inventory possible? That doesn't make sense. I can't sell it if I don't have it. What's the downside to having inventory? If I'm a car dealer, what's the downside to having 1,000 vehicles on that lot? So you have to purchase that inventory. Is it a liability sitting there? What if somebody comes through with a BB gun? Or you have a hailstorm? So inventory is a liability. It's good to have because I can sell it, but I want the minimum. I want to anticipate what my customers are going to order and then have just that amount of inventory. Inventory is very expensive to maintain. I want to get better customer loyalty. I want to reduce my costs. A better relationship with my suppliers. The better that relationship is, they know when they have to order and put together materials to send to me. So I have a better relationship with those suppliers. And really what our whole end game is superior service. We want our customers to think we're the greatest thing in the world, and we want to provide them that great service. So things like tracking systems. How many of you order something and you're immediately tracking it, making sure it's going to get there? Yeah, we all do that. How many of you have ordered someplace where you don't have any clue when it's going to get there? Is that frustrating? It's not good customer service. Would you probably pay a little more to see that the progress of that package along its way? Yeah, and we figured that out. And so a lot of companies say, all right, well, we're gonna figure out, we're gonna be willing to spend that money, but we have to process it and put these things in place to do that. So this is a list of a few companies that bring out some of these products that you can buy for ERP systems. So small businesses, medium-sized businesses. So QuickBooks actually is a form of an ERP system. The big brother to QuickBooks is something called Sage. So Sage and QuickBooks are actually owned by the same company called Intuit, whatever. But So Sage is a much bigger product, so a company that's too big for QuickBooks. There's OpenPro, there's tons and tons of these. And we're going to show you a list of some other interesting ones, because I think the growth isn't in this idea of we're just buying that software. I think when we're talking about it, we're going to look at this idea of it existing on the internet and on the web. So we also get all this data, and now we have to do something with it. We've got all this data about our business. We have to process it, and we have to see if we can find some use for it. Is there additional things we can find out? So we're going to find in the next couple of weeks, we're going to look at some pieces about how to do it. But one of the terms you're going to hear is something called data mining. So I take all this data from all my customers. Can I figure out a way to better serve those customers or find additional customers? When customers reject a shopping cart, if I know why, that may lead to some differences. And so that's why a lot of times you'll see a question come up. Are you sure you want to abandon your cart? What else could we do? Or they'll send, actually, you'll see an email coming later and saying, hey, I saw you dropped your cart. What else can we do? So one of the things we'd like to do is eliminate people. People are expensive. People are expensive. So I know you're looking at your paycheck and going, man, I'm not expensive. But the reality is labor is expensive. So if I can automate things, so think about Walmart. What are they doing at Walmart to eliminate people at the front end of the store when you check out? Self-checkout. So instead of 4 people checking you out, you have 1 person kind of supervising that, and 4 or 6 or 8 people, you're scanning your own items. The only way we can do that is through automated data collection. That idea of, you guys have those UPC codes we're scanning. If we could put those RFID tags we talked about and the whole thing just checked out automatically, that'd be perfect. You think there's some fraud in that? How many people cheat when they're at the self-checking? Yeah. How many people accidentally cheat, though? How many people you scan something twice and you go, man, I don't even want to bother because this looks like a pain in the butt. I'm just going to go ahead and pay for my bubble gum twice because I don't even care because I want out of Walmart that bad. So do you think they've ran numbers and they've tried to figure that out? And they've said, you know what, even though we know we've had some fraud and we're losing some money, it's still cheaper than paying a person. People are expensive. We want to minimize people. So one of the ways that we're doing that is this idea of through the cloud. In other words, we don't have to buy that system and put it on our servers and build a data closet and do all those things. We're doing it through the cloud. One of the areas I see a big growth area is something called POS systems, point of sale. It's not the 1948 hoopty car, the piece of crap, point of sale. So point of sale is when you go up to a vendor and you can scan that, point of sale, they automatically are able to take that item and put it into an inventory system and check it out. Almost every business now has them. Even if you go to the flea market in Brownville, some of the vendors down there have put in point-of-sale systems. And part of that is that ability now we can do that in the cloud. Companies will say, all right, here's your terminal. You need to put in your inventory. We store all that data for you. We take care of sales tax. And at the end, all your employee has to do is scan an item. That's important for a couple of reasons. One, it lets people check out very quickly. Keeps your employees from guessing about prices because you have that all programmed in there. We know exactly where your inventory is going. So it allows you to print reports really, really quickly. So we do have this issue of data validity. In other words, once we're done, how do we make sure that that data is correct? And so we'll have some screening tools. We make some rules up. So we know that cost data has got to be a numeric or a number. All right. We know that a name, for example, should start with an alphabetical character, and that's the way we can identify that maybe it's a proper noun in our system. So we can do some data validity testing of both data we receive. So think about, you're getting all this data from web surveys. And right now with this election coming up, you're seeing a lot of surveys and things going out there. And if you participate in them, they need to screen that data. Well, one of the ways they screen that data, because some people will say, man, I'm going to mess up this system, I'm just going to sit here and hit random keys. So they can screen that data and try to pull out some of it that's not really valuable data. And using those key phrases and codes, you can do that. If we validate it, we also need to correct it. And we've all been on a website and you started trying to type in a phone number and it kept saying, nope, that's wrong. And you're trying to type in the dot or the hash or something in there, and it's not letting you do it. Those error messages, when any time on our system, they need to be clear and concise and say, hey, this is what you need to do. The best one is all the passwords, because every site has different password requirements, it seems like. So the error message should at least tell you, hey, you need one capital letter, one number. It needs to be 12 characters long. So when you see that error message, you get that and you can re-enter that data very quickly. If I get to a site and I have to re-enter data a couple of times, what do I do? Do you walk away from it? Yeah. So unless I have a lot of value attached to it, and I think there's some great bargain, or there's some need, so, oh, it's my yearly application for my job, I'm not going to necessarily put a lot of effort into that. So the better we can grab that data from people, the easier. The latest one that I think is pretty cool is on a lot of mobile apps, instead of having to put in your credit card, what can you do with it? Have you guys ran into this one yet? It actually uses your camera and it scans your credit card for you. So it pulls the numbers off of it, off the front of your card, and you don't have to squint there and try to see what in the world those numbers are. And it's that idea that we get that data correct the first time. Because when you get older, you're going to find that those numbers on those credit cards, you got to hold the card out to about here, and they're all like flashy and blurry, and it's hard to read. You're going to see those kinds of things. How do I minimize that data? So processing. Now we've got our orders in. People have put in their credit cards. We have to somehow perform and monitor and manage that data. So we process it. So that your order goes, so you get your big fluffy bean bag, and it goes to the data center, and it goes to the warehouse, and the right warehouse. Now we've done this, we've sent your product, now we have to store that data. So that we know that the data we have is preserved. So A, if you want to come back and complain about your product, I know about it, but more importantly, that data is valuable to us as a business because it lets us see what we can do next time. How do I improve that? How do I change that? So we do that with you guys as students. We look at what can we do next? How can we get more students or better quality students? Because one of the things we know, if a student comes in here with an ACT of an 8, did you know you can get a composite ACT score of an 8? I didn't either. We have had a student who came here with an ACT of an 8. Is that student probably going to stick around as long as somebody who's got a 25? No. And so the better in, the better out. So now we can monitor that data and get better customers. Just like Amazon. Does Amazon want better customers? Yeah. If you're a repeat customer, if you're willing to pay for Amazon Prime and you're willing to spend thousands of dollars a year, they want you as a customer. That somewhere along in here, somebody's going to want a report. Businesses thrive on this idea of we have to run reports and see how we're doing compared to last year, this year, last week, last minute. So reports let us see how we are doing. So maybe it's current inventory. Maybe it's a report we have to send out to federal agencies, local agencies, state agencies, things like taxes. If we're a nonprofit, we have all kinds of things. Think about here in our financial aid department. They have to send things in to the feds all the time about financial aid. We have to send in details to the accrediting agencies. All those kinds of things happen. So reports are not necessarily just those things that get printed out and set on somebody's desk and they never get looked at. A lot of times these have a very active function once we do them. And some reports are automatically triggered. So we may have ones that are triggered monthly, and we may have ones that are done what we call ad hoc. In other words, we do them when we need them. So ERP systems. Product supply, manufacturing, accounting, taxes, the evil amount of taxes and accounting that happen, sales and marketing. And we want to put all these things together. It really makes sense to have one big overarching umbrella to see what happens. So these really started with this idea back in the 70s. Cars were still being made. But if you've ever seen the quality of a car from 1970, are they great? They are? I might argue with that in terms of a lot of things. But so let's say a business in 1970. They didn't have any way to know how much steel to order, how much glass to order. And we came up with systems that were able to automate some of that original materials planning. And then we said, hey, we've also got accounting, we've got human resources. How do we start combining that all together? So this really kind of stemmed from large manufacturers. The car makers are one of the best examples of that. They're one of the big manufacturers in our country. They drive our economy. Now we have knowledge-based companies, so like Google driving the economy, Apple. But we had to come up with a way to take this challenge on, to integrate everything. And in the 70s, a supercomputer, the entire data center the size of this room, was less powerful than your phone in your pocket. So we had to take advantage of what we had and try to use it. We've evolved significantly since then. But the advantage is still the same. Not what I need. So the advantages are still very similar. We want all of that pieces together. We want to get rid of those old legacy systems that were kind of tying us down. So we had siloed systems, so inventory here, accounting here, human resources here. And we wanted to put that all together. And we saw there was a lot of value in it. But it was expensive, so large companies took the leap to start with. So you kind of tend to break them into tiers. So tier 1, way over $1 billion. Well, that's not Peru, is it? No. But there are companies that have $1 billion in sales. A lot of them. I don't own any of them, so I'm kind of sad with that. But those are kind of your Fortune 500 very large companies. Next, we have kind of the middle, the small and medium-sized businesses. And I know you think, man, small, but they're saying 50 million. Well, if you think of our state college system in its entirety, we're at about in that range of 50 million. There are some vendors around here. So if you go and look in Auburn, you can find a couple of companies making around that mark. And then we have the tier 3, the smaller ones. But those are the ones we typically tend to see here. So 10 million to 50. Does it have to be 10 million or an ERP system doesn't help them? No. But that's kind of the target range. So that's kind of a self-sustaining company. $10 million means you've probably got 50 to 100 employees. You're kind of in that range where you can start to see that. So plug for Microsoft, they have a vendor. So there are some very big ones. We use one from a company called SAP, which is a German firm. But now we're getting this idea of cloud-based. And these cloud-based ones are starting to come down where smaller and smaller companies can use them. They're a little less flexible. So when we have something like SAP, we tailor it specifically to our needs. And we're paying millions of dollars for it. On the other hand, you can use a smaller company. So QuickBooks has an online inventory ERP system, and it'll handle a small business, and it's a couple $100 to $500 or $1,000 a year, depending on which modules you use. That's affordable. Now we start putting those pieces in. One of the pieces we have not talked about is, I think, one of the most important. That is that idea of customer relationships. Those relationships with our suppliers, relationships with our customers. And so CRM systems are becoming important. We sort of use one here on our campus. So admissions uses one, but it doesn't extend out to the rest of us, and I think that's a problem. So in a true CRM system, every contact with a customer is logged, and you as students are considered customers. So when you apply to go to school here, we should be able to see when and how and what you did, and then when you come over as advisors, we should be able to log into the same system. And we should have that information of, hey, student X decided that this was an interest, and we shouldn't have that knowledge. Right now we have little pieces and we have to try to gather it all up. So eventually a CRM system, I think, is in our future. So it's trying to get data in sales, marketing, and try to figure out how do I increase that. It's as simple as systems that integrate with social media and will send you out a birthday card or a reminder. Does that mean a whole lot, a birthday card? It can. So in 1999, I bought a truck in Fort Pierce, Florida. Does anybody know where Fort Pierce, Florida is? It's along the beach. And that car dealer's still there. And one of the things they do is they get a lot of information. If you've been to a car dealer, they suck in a lot of information. So until I moved the last time to Auburn, I got flowers on my birthday every year. They knew I was out of state, but their CRM system, and they said, you know what? This guy walked in and bought a truck. I referred a few other people to him because I had a great transaction with them. And quite honestly, if I wanted another Dodge, I would probably think about buying one from them and driving it up, fly down, pick it up, being it was that good a transaction. But that reminder every year also was a really nice touch. So even things like those little cards. Now, a card, a birthday card, an email reminder, those kinds of things are how we increase that. So just those little reminders. So maybe a phone call or a social media message. Social media is becoming really prevalent in that. How do I stay in touch with those? So little notes like, hey, Bob was just telling me about his daughter's going to graduate in May. And then in May you send a message going, hey, Bob, congratulations to your daughter for graduating. And we know that if we give something to a customer, and in this case it's just a goodwill message, they want to reciprocate. And it's one of those social strategies we use. And so maybe they'll decide, hey, this is the place I want to buy a car from instead of Joe Bob's Auto down the street. And so we use that. Think about that with students. If you got a message when you were in high school and you got a card or something about something that you were doing in school, wouldn't that kind of feel good? And I don't think we're necessarily really great at it yet, and other schools I have seen probably do a little better job. Now, part of that is other schools also have a bigger marketing budget. So do you think something like Creighton, and I'll pick on Creighton because it's the highest priced school in our state, they're going to have some more money to spend those kinds of dollars on customer relationship, right? And so, but all of these things go in together. One of the things I really love that we do, and I don't think we can pull it off continually because it pulled a lot of resources, but in the spring we formed those PALS groups. That's a form of customer relationship. Did you guys get calls from your PALS group? Was that kind of a nice, like, hey, they actually care about us? I really think it was kind of a cool idea. It said, you know what, we're trying to figure out, because I will say we still did lose a lot of students. And it is a different experience doing everything online, locked in your room, than being on campus and having that daily reminders of what's happening and what's going on. But a CRM is how we provide all that. So all this data gets together, and we might make some links that we didn't realize that are in there. And that's one of the great tools that we find in there is people get linked together and we see where they're at, where they're doing. So advantages, things we do, social networking, contact data. So we find friends of yours. We find people that are connected to you. And so we know that in terms of groups, people tend to associate with people that are very similar. So let me think of a great example for that. We also use it in credit decisions. So if you hang out with a bunch of losers, deadbeats who don't pay their bills, nobody's in this group, right? He's like, yeah, no. Are your friends kind of the same way, probably? And you know those groups of people. On the other hand, do you know some people who always pay their bills, They're in church 4 times a day on Sunday. That group all stays together, right? So we know that if we can look and analyze and see your data groups and your social groups, that might be a great marketing technique for you. If I find people who are like me that buy way too much crap on Amazon, well, crud, it's kind of like my friends, because a lot of my friends are the same way. We regularly talk about on social media about the Amazon lottery. Like, oh man, there's an Amazon package. I don't remember what I ordered. What the heck is it? So if I can find those groups and people together, great, I increase that. So analysis, customer management, support. Support. If I have to wait a couple of days to get an answer on a question, am I moving on to the next company? I think about here at Peru, if I were applying for a college and I had questions, and as a younger person, if I put myself in the shoes of somebody who's 17, 18 years old trying to go to school, I'm not going to wait around for a couple of days for a letter or an email. I want that chat support. I want somebody to answer my message today. Now, weirdly, I probably don't want him to call me because, the phone is not for calling. It's for chatting and texting, right? So I need that quick response, and I need those things. And I think we're putting some of that in place on our online systems at this point. So this is an example of one, and it just has fields for a customer. So this is one from SAP, which we actually use pieces of, but every module they charge for, of course. So it's just got a lot of information about a person and a company. So there's a lot of companies out there. This is not an invasive list by any means. The one you may have heard of is one called Salesforce.com. It's probably the most famous in a weird way. And if you look at the cost, that's not accurate anymore, but it's actually one of the more affordable ones. That's why it's very popular. So there are hundreds and hundreds of them out there. Finding the one that fits your needs. But it's also really good to fit one that's popular. And the reason is, in some cases, you can see data from other companies and other data pools that are out there. Ooh. So now we do a lot of this piece on smartphones and web apps and different things. So one last piece we want to talk about is this idea of project lifestyle management. Ooh. So there's some terms we need to deal with in here. So if we're making something, we probably have a project lifecycle management. So in this case, wherever we start, it's a continual process. Design, production, delivery, service and support, retire and replace, and that's a growing market of not only do I say, hey, you bought our computer this year, but in 3 years we'll come and take it away and get you a new one. Sales and marketing, research, concepts, design. So it's a continual process, and we want to make it that way. So when I go buy a new computer at Dell, one of the questions that I often ask, especially on the business side, is, do you want to pay an extra $10 up front to make this go away in 3 or 4 or 5 years? And most of us are cheap when we first see that. We go, no, I don't want to spend $15 more. But is that actually cost savings at the end? So as a state, these computers, when they die, we're going to pay $1 a pound literally to get rid of them. So I can guarantee we save money. And plus, as a business, it puts you in that cycle of we can continually get pieces in there. A couple other terms. So you'll see CAD, computer-aided design. That's how we design things. Engineering says we're going to take those components. So the other one you might see is something called finite element analysis. You guys all looked at me blankly. So in other words, if I'm an engineer and I've designed a building, I analyze all those pieces to make sure that the building isn't going to fall down. That would be a really good thing. And then finally, the end of that is computer-aided manufacturing. So we design both the tools and how we put something together. So if I think of something very, very complicated like a Boeing 777, which has 1 million parts you're trying to assemble, they do it all inside of a computer before they ever sit down and try to assemble all the parts on a floor. And so they've stepped through. If I think of like a car, they do that. They try to assemble it, figure out all the modules, where we're going to put robots, what is a human's tool. And so we do that all inside of that computer-aided manufacturing. So they all stem from this idea of this life cycle. So designing the plane, figuring out that the plane's going to fly, figuring out how to build the plane, if you want to think about it in those terms. So architects, for example, use a lot of CAD, so the other place you'll see it. The engineering says, all right, now we know that it's not going to fall down. And then they even in buildings, they'll even use manufacturing techniques online or on a computer to try to design how they're going to build it. One of the things that we have to think about is what we're building or what we're using for a product. So we have two different types, discrete. So in other words, parts we can see that form other parts. So if I build a phone or I build a wireless mic like this, it's built out of parts, and I can take it apart and I can put it back together and I can put other pieces in it. That's called discrete manufacturing. Cars, most of the stuff you think about. Process, though, process manufacturing is that of assembling something where I can't tell one piece from another. So when you buy shampoo, you can't tell all the individual components in shampoo. Or you buy gasoline as a manufactured product. Or if you go buy some kind of medicine, or any of those kinds of types, they're what we call a process manufacturer. So they're all built all the same, but we can't break it down into any further pieces. So that PLM can do a couple of things for us. Reduce time to market, so in other words, I can figure out how to build that plane quicker. Reducing costs, so standardizing parts among different manufacturers. So there's a lot of stories about manufacturers looking at things like air conditioners and saying, all right, that square box that's an air conditioner, why does every product we have use different size bolts? And we standardize parts and we standardize pieces, so we're reducing costs. Reducing any wasted materials. And part of that comes over the time of experience and looking at things. So when I was last in Colorado, my brother-in-law took me on a tour of a couple of projects he's designed. He's an architect. And we looked at some staircases, and it was kind of interesting because he's looking at them, and they're the original staircases he built, very large, very heavy, very chunky, a lot of metal. And he said, it works, it's great, but it was super expensive. And when I actually analyze them now and I think about it, I was nervous as an architect to start with. I wanted to make sure it didn't ever fall down. Then we looked at his newest products, much cheaper because there's less materials. But using that finite element analysis, he's able to say, hey, it's actually as strong as this product over here. And so reducing costs. And then regulatory compliance. So in a lot of cases, we have to deal with federal, state, local regulations. So if I'm building pipelines or pipes that are used in the gas industry, everyone has to be numbered and serialed so I know if that pipe is the one that breaks. And you think, man, I just bought a stick of pipe at Home Depot for $4. Well, the same stuff they're going to put in the ground out here for natural gas all has to be serial numbered and detailed so we know where it comes from. We want to be able to track those things down. Even things like meat processing. If you look at your meat package, you'll notice that there's numbers on it, where it's made, where it's processed. That's all so we can take that and we can actually find out where it came from. So, what are some of the challenges? This ERP sounds really great. We're going to save money. We're going to make our company better. We're going to have more sales. The biggest thing we have is that cost. This is expensive. Millions and millions. Some large companies have spent billions of dollars doing it. So, it's a lot of money up front for a hopeful return in the future. So we know that. So the cost, sometimes it takes a long time. It also disrupts our business as we're doing it. We have people that get pissed off. We all run into them. When you change something, have you ever noticed that? You go, man, why did they change Facebook's interface? So change frustrates all of us. I don't care if you're 7 or 70, change is frustrating to us. So how do we control what gets customized and changes? So there's a lot of pieces in there. People are going to be frustrated. You will probably have some employee turnover because you do this. And you'll hear that phrase, well, we've always done it this way. Great. And that's where your company is at now. Do you want to go to that next level, or do you want to fail and be the next company that fails? So what can I do? There's some things out there. Be realistic about it. Know that it's going to take time. It's going to frustrate. There needs to be a champion on this project. So something like the CEO, CFO, somebody very high up in the organization, a top executive, that is championing this entire project. You want to hire people that have done this before. Great, we can do this all in-house. No, hire somebody who's done it before and bring them in as a project manager in most cases. Allowing time and money. Time and money is critical. We did that here. We built a new system a few years ago, this MyPSC system you guys all use for logging in. It was a great effort. All the state schools put together. So Chadron Wayne, UNL, UNMC, all of them went together. That's a great idea. They had about $40 million. That sounds like a lot of money. But by the time they made changes, at the end, one of the problems was we got the product developed, but all that money and time for training and learning how to use it, well, we don't have that. And so even now, I know there are some faculty and some staff that are frustrated about the way things work in MyPSC. They never got fixed. And there's some pieces at the end that should have been implemented that just are now coming on board. So I think you guys now have access to the 4-year planning. Do you guys have that in MyPSC yet? Sort of. You guys are like, what are you talking about? All right. So from the beginning, the idea was you'd be able to plan all 4 years of your school in MyPSC. It's possible. Other places do it. And we struggled to even implement a waitlist system. A waitlist system, in other words, if a class is full, you're on a waiting list to get into that class, so when a spot opens, you're automatically slid into it. If I enroll, same system at UNO, I'm on that waitlist system. A spot opens up, it slides me into the class, and will unenroll me in my optional class. So if I had enrolled in Business 231 and tried to get in there, and I was going to drop Productions Operations Management, if I did get in, does it all automatically for me. We didn't get to that point. We were out of that time and money phase. So here's one of the issues. A lot of these systems are built what we call best practices in the industry. But maybe we don't do things the way every other business does. Do we change the system, or do we change the way our business operates? Because we can change the way our system works, but maybe we need to examine those processes and see, why are we doing something so weird that other companies aren't? And we run into that a lot. People are like, well, we've always done it this way because we had to write out a paper form because Myrtle down in accounting couldn't read our other form, so we just made up our own new form for Myrtle. Time out. Stop. Figure out what you're doing and why you're doing it wrong in some cases. My wife works for, her main job is at UNL. She does work for another organization, and she is what they call a supervising practitioner there. So she supervises all the therapists in her group in terms of she has to read their reports and make sure everything's done. The other thing she does is work with their medical billing system. So their medical ERP system that they've developed to put all those records in there of when people are in there for therapy sessions. And one of the issues they ran into is there's different accrediting. Just like we have accrediting agencies for our college, there's accreditation for mental health and hospitals. The big accrediting agency is one called JCAHO. JCAHO comes in and a couple of years ago said, why are you not doing the standard form we have for suicide prevention? I think that's pretty critical in a mental health facility. And so my wife was part of this project, and she says, well, I don't know. We all do except for one division. One division didn't like that form, so they just decided to rewrite it. And they put it into the ERP system. Didn't make sense. It's not accredited, and the accrediting agency even said, that is not the form that you must have to get billing approval for Medicaid and insurance companies. Fix it. And to this date, they have still resisted doing that because they want to have their own form, which is different than what the norm is. Is that best business practice? No. And in fact, it's one of those where if the CEO of this organization really understood, they would put their foot down and say, hey, you need to change this form because it's not what we need. But they brought in somebody as a raiser of funds, basically, versus somebody that understood that therapeutic model and those things. So you need to be sure. What are we doing? We do things here we used to. Hopefully we've gotten a lot better. Where things were just printed out. They really weren't a form like you think. We had all these forms online. What those forms online did was actually sent somebody an email, and they would have to then print that out, highlight the data they wanted to type in somewhere else on it. It didn't move from form into our system automatically. But that's the way the business process had been running. Why do we want to change it? We want to be efficient. We want to be as efficient as possible. So this model of hosted software. So in other words, somebody else does it for us. This is becoming increasingly common. The other term for it, and we've seen it earlier, was SaaS, S-A-A-S. So somebody else has the server. Somebody else has the programmers. All we're doing is renting that software. Keeps our IT staff low. We have somebody to ask questions. Hopefully it's more secure. So we get a lot of benefits. Is it cheap? No. But you gain a lot of advantage from it. The biggest advantage is that system startup. Quick. We can actually get it running very quickly. We buy the software or rent it. We get that outsourced management. We don't have to deal with it internally. Lower implementation risk because we have less money out there. But there's some efforts, some downsides to that also. So we don't have as much control over it. We have to be wary of data because it's not under our direct control. Now I'm going to argue that these guys probably have a security team much better than what we're going to develop. So there's a lot of advantages, I think, for this idea of hosting it somewhere else. So for my own little side business, I host my accounting software online. I don't do everything on a spreadsheet or put it in Excel. I actually use a company that I can make tickets and I can do all kinds of implementation. So I can look at literally at a day and say, how much money have I made last year? How much money have I made this year? Ooh, wow, how do I need to make more money? Those kinds of things. And so the firm I use is very reasonable. I think I pay a couple $100 a year for it. And that allows me to track it. So ready for income taxes? I click a button and here's my report for the end of the year. Here's what I spent. Here's what I made. And here's how much sales tax and different pieces I'm going to have to pay. So I think it's a very effective model. All right, let's talk about our homework really quickly. So there's two pieces of homework this week that are a little tougher. Where did I put them? Come back here. So in week 8, make sure you are doing, so there's videos, there's also a couple of these that are actually worth some points. So the putting principles in practice is one. Takes you a couple of minutes to do that assignment. You have an assignment here that said research to identify 3 organizations that develop and operate e-commerce websites for their clients. And so that's what I think is a little confusing. Because I got a couple of questions and I hadn't had a chance to respond to all the emails that are backed up yet. What some people were asking about was, okay, so should I pick like Walmart? Does Walmart develop e-commerce for themselves or do they or for other clients? Or do they actually in some cases outsource that? So outsourcing. So what I did really quick to give you guys kind of an idea of what's in here, if I can drag it across. So I just searched for top web design companies. And so you may have to do a little searching because most of these aren't very big that they list in this list. But if you do that search for web design or e-marketing companies, you're going to find some that are very large that take on campaigns the scale of Walmart, the scale of Amazon. So we're looking at those kinds of firms, those who design that for them. So this is just a search I found, but some of it's kind of interesting to see the amount of money that they're charging. I know we have charged or had companies charge us. So you'll see some out here. So this company says, oh, our average price is about $50,000. We charge 10 to 49, or we have 10 to 49 employees. So It's an example of that company, and you can do a little research on it. So you can find 3 of those, but I want ones that are large companies that are attacking large markets. We have one in Auburn/Lincoln, BCom Enterprises, but do they take on really large clients? Not at this point. Who develops sites for the NFL? Maybe it's something you can look at. Big sites, websites you see, sometimes they will even tag it at the bottom and say, this site developed by Eyesight Media or somebody. So do a little thinking outside the box there. The other part of that was then, when I look at their website, a lot of times they're looking for people. Is that a job that appeals to me? So would you be just all coding? No. A lot of the website work is now doing interaction with your customers, designing social media. We actually have apparently a company on campus today doing some photo shoots that we're going to use in our social media and on our website. So I got an email today that they're going to be here. So the assignment in there, you need to find who designs the websites. So look at it from that market. So Google is your friend. The other assignment you have this week is a discussion board. And the discussion board asks you this. You need to find data on the business to consumer, e-commerce and retail sales over the past 10 years. You're going to build an Excel spreadsheet and make a chart. So we're going to test your Excel skills a little bit. And you need to make a chart. And what I want you to do is predict the year that business to consumer e-commerce will exceed 15% of this total overall sales. Now you may find that's already happened. But probably there is a little bit of how do I find a site. So one of the places I listed, let me throw if I put it back in here. So it doesn't give you all the data you need, but it shows you a couple of things that might be interesting. So we tend to forget about the Census Bureau and some of this government data. And in fact look, it shows a lot of the data we might need. Where did it come from? And this is not the right data you need, so let me point this out. This data is only first quarter to second quarter. How many quarters are there in a year? 4, so it doesn't have everything. But what it shows is this data trends. So data tends to be cyclical. And I don't know if we've talked about, or in any of your classes you've talked about things like deseasoning data. Do you guys do that in statistics where you look at sales data over a year and how you deal with it? No? Okay. You guys are all looking at me blankly. So this has 2 pieces of data. So the red line is not adjusted data, and the blue line is adjusted for seasons. So season adjusting. Are there periods of the year that we sell more products than others? Yeah. So think about, let's take a typical product. When do we think we sell the most of it? Christmas. What? Christmas? Think about that. We sell nothing in January because, nobody has any money left. Kind of goes up, and then around Christmas time, peaks up. Now, there's other products that have different ones. So motorcycle sales here, are they more prevalent in the summer or the winter? So sales are different. They're not uniform over the year. So in this case, this is first and second quarter data, and so this Census Bureau might be a great resource to find data at. And you'll notice that our percent of total, so this is total retail sales, but notice what happens. So we'll just take a look at this data, and I know it's a little hard to see up here. It's going up, so it's got a trend. So I would predict at some point that it's going to be more than 15%, except for we don't know what's going to actually happen in 2020, but in the first quarter of 2020, why did online sales spike? Corona. Nobody could go to retail stores, right? So that's going to change some of your modeling and your predictions a little bit. So if I scroll down, it's actually got some additional pieces. So it's got some raw numbers, and you can actually see some of that data. So this might be a great place to find it. So here we have retail sales. What I noticed then, e-commerce as a percent of total adjusted, I'm going to say we have now hit our 15% with coronavirus, and I did not realize that. So notice we go in first quarter of 2020, we're at 11.8, and then we jump to 16.1. So it's a huge percentage change, but our total volume of sales is actually down. So there's some interesting pieces in there. So I'd like you to try to find and try to build an Excel spreadsheet and do some predictive for me. This is a task you're going to find in a lot of businesses they get asked to do in their model when you come in there. Like, look at our sales. What are our sales going to be next year? How do I model that and predict that? So give it your best effort, and we'll take a look at it when we come back in next week. Also for next week, I'm heading a lot to this weekend, look at chapter 6. Read chapter 6 in your textbook, okay? All right, any questions? If you have questions this weekend, send me questions. I will be sitting in Omaha, hanging out, not doing much other than answering emails. All right, let's get out of here. I will see you on Monday. Yes?
I checked the midterm.
It shows a 1?
Yeah.
That just means you did it. I just put a value in there so I could see who did them and who didn't.
Oh.
It's not your actual score, so
Okay.
no, don't worry about that.
So from Monday, can I do it tomorrow? 11 o'clock?
11 o'clock? Yeah, let's just do it. I'll do it. This lab works fine. Sorry I wasn't able to be here. I got stuck at the doctor longer than I...
You're fine.
Yeah.
Also,